The woods were quieter than either of them expected. The kind of quiet that pressed against your skin, heavier than silence itself. Claire sat curled up on the couch inside the cabin, her knees tucked to her chest, watching the fire spit sparks into the dim air. The logs hissed, settling deeper into the flames. She'd always dreamed of nights like this. A place without honking horns, without the constant glow of neon, without the arguments in their cramped apartment that echoed louder than they ever should. This cabin, this fire, this moment, was supposed to be their reset button. Ethan walked in from the kitchen with 2 glasses of wine, balancing them like he was carrying something sacred. He smiled faintly at her, his tired eyes catching the firelight. "See," he said, handing her a glass. "Told you it'd be worth the drive." Claire smiled back, though there was a trace of hesitation in her expression. The trip had taken them 6 hours, winding down dark, lonely roads with no service bars on their phones. She'd already joked about how easily someone could disappear out here and never be found. But Ethan had dismissed her worries with that half-grin of his. "No stress, no noise, no people," he said again, raising his glass. "Just us." "Just us," she echoed, clinking her glass against his. The first sip was sharp, and the warmth spread quickly. For a while, the quiet didn't feel so suffocating. They talked about small things, what to cook tomorrow, whether they'd hike the trails, how maybe this was the start of something new between them. For a fleeting moment, it really did feel like peace. Then the sound came. It was so faint at first Claire almost thought she imagined it. A hollow thump. Like knuckles against wood. Her body stiffened, the wine glass pausing halfway to her lips. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Ethan set his glass down and cocked his head. "Nothing but the hiss of the fire." He shook his head. "You're just jumpy. First night in the woods." But a moment later, it came again. Louder this time. A sharp, deliberate knock against the front door. Both of them froze. Claire's pulse quickened. "Maybe it's the owner," Ethan whispered, though his tone wasn't convincing. "Checking in or something." "Not at this hour." Claire's voice cracked slightly. She glanced at the old wooden clock above the mantel. It was nearly midnight. The knock came again. 3 short raps that rattled the wood. Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the floor, and Claire grabbed his arm. "Don't open it. It could be someone lost," he said, though his voice carried uncertainty. "A hiker or someone with car trouble." "Then why wouldn't they say something?" she whispered back. "Why just knock?" The fire popped loudly, startling her. Another knock. Louder. Ethan moved toward the door, each step hesitant. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Claire's breath fogged in her throat as she whispered, "Ethan, please. Don't." He paused at the door, hand hovering over the knob. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved. And then, a shadow slipped past the window. Claire saw it in the corner of her eye, a quick dark shape against the thin curtain. Her stomach dropped. "Ethan," she hissed. He turned, his face pale. "Did you see?" Before he could finish, the knock came again, harder this time, rattling the door in its frame. Ethan stepped back, his hand dropping away from the knob. They both stared at the door like it might splinter open. The silence that followed was worse. The waiting. The not knowing. Claire grabbed her phone from the coffee table. The screen was black. She pressed the button. Nothing. Dead. She glanced at Ethan's phone on the counter. He picked it up, tried the same thing. Dead. Her chest tightened. The fire flickered low, shadows stretching long across the cabin walls. And then, outside the window, another shadow moved. This time slower. Deliberate. Claire's heart hammered so loudly she thought whoever, or whatever, was outside would hear it. She whispered, "Ethan, someone's out there." He put a finger to his lips, his eyes wide. He moved toward the window, pulling the curtain just slightly. The color drained from his face. Claire clutched the blanket tighter around herself. "What did you see?" He swallowed hard. "Someone. Just standing there." The words felt like ice poured down her spine. The knock came again, a pounding now, each strike vibrating through the cabin. Claire's glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. The sound echoed like gunfire. Outside, the shadows gathered. Watching. Waiting. And the night that was supposed to be peaceful began to unravel into something else entirely. The knock didn't come again. That was almost worse. Claire and Ethan stood frozen, staring at the door, both waiting for the next strike. But the silence that followed pressed down like a weight. Every second stretched until it became unbearable. Ethan moved first, slowly backing away from the door. His breathing was shallow, unsteady. Claire hadn't seen him like this before, not even during their worst fights. His calm, logical mask had slipped, and underneath it was fear. Maybe it's just a prank," he whispered. "A prank? Out here? In the middle of nowhere?" Her voice rose before she could stop it, breaking the suffocating quiet. "Keep it down." His hand shot up, as if to push the words back into her throat. His eyes flicked toward the window. "They'll hear you." "They already know we're here," she said bitterly. The fire crackled, but even that sound felt like a threat now, too loud, too sharp. The cabin no longer seemed warm and safe. It was exposed, fragile. Thin walls. Weak locks. Nothing between them and whoever waited outside. Ethan crossed to the small table against the wall and picked up the flashlight they'd brought in from the car. He clicked it on, sweeping the beam across the cabin. The shadows retreated, then returned as if mocking the light. "Don't," Claire said when he aimed it toward the curtain. "If you shine it out there, they'll know we're watching." "They already know," he repeated, his voice hardening, though his hand trembled slightly. He pulled the curtain aside an inch. Claire held her breath, her stomach twisting into knots. Nothing but trees. Dark trunks, endless and still. Then, just at the edge of the beam, something moved. A figure. Standing still, facing the cabin. Ethan's jaw clenched. "There's someone there." Claire's nails dug into her palms. "How many?" He hesitated. I don't know. At least one." Her throat went dry. "What do they want?" As if in answer, there came another knock. Not on the door this time. On the window behind her. Claire spun around, her breath catching in her chest. A faint tap. Then another. Gentle. Teasing. She stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall. "Oh my God, Ethan." He raised the flashlight, his hand shaking. He shone it directly at the window. A mask stared back at them. White. Featureless. A blank face with hollow eye holes. No mouth. No expression. Just emptiness. Claire screamed, clapping her hands over her mouth to smother the sound. Ethan dropped the curtain, stumbling backward. The tap came again, playful now. Like the masked figure enjoyed her fear. Claire's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "What do we do?" she whispered. Ethan's mind raced, but his face betrayed his panic. "We wait. Maybe they'll get bored and leave." "Bored?" Her voice cracked. "Ethan, they're not here for fun. Look at them. They're here for us." The words sank into him, heavy and undeniable. The power flickered suddenly. The lights buzzed, then died, plunging the cabin into darkness. Only the fire glowed faintly, painting the room in sickly orange light. Claire's breathing grew ragged. She grabbed Ethan's arm, her fingers clutching desperately. No, 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 this can't be happening. Outside, the crunch of leaves. Footsteps circling the cabin. One set, then another. More than one of them. Claire counted, left, right, shuffle, pause. Then another rhythm overlapping. At least two. Maybe three. They're surrounding us, she whispered. Ethan grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were wide, wild, but determined. Listen to me, we don't panic. We don't give them what they want. Her teeth chattered. And what do they want, Ethan? The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed down again, suffocating. Then, from the front door, came the slow creak of wood bending under weight. Someone leaning against it. Testing it. The knob jiggled. Claire's knees nearly gave out. Ethan rushed forward and shoved the small lock into place. It clicked, pathetically fragile. His voice broke as he muttered, "This door won't hold." As if to prove him right, there came a sudden, violent pound on the door. Then another. The frame shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling. Claire screamed again, unable to stop herself this time. And then, as quickly as it started, the pounding stopped. Silence. Claire's ears rang with it. The only sound was the faint crackle of the dying fire. She wanted to believe it was over. That whoever was out there had given up. But in the pit of her stomach, she knew better. The silence wasn't safety. It was waiting. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. Claire pressed her hands to her ears, desperate to drown it out, but all she could hear was her own frantic breathing. Every inhale, every shaky exhale, made her feel more exposed. Ethan stood rigid in front of the door, as though his body could keep it closed if the lock failed. His chest rose and fell sharply. In the dim orange glow of the dying fire, his face looked older, worn down by fear. "They're gone," he whispered, though his voice cracked as he said it. "No, they're not." Claire's reply was immediate, harsh. She could feel it in her bones, they hadn't left. They were still there, in the darkness, standing just beyond sight. Watching. Waiting. The floorboards creaked as she backed away from the window, dragging the blanket with her like it could shield her from what she knew was coming. Then, faintly, the sound returned. Not knocking. Not footsteps. Whistling. A low, tuneless whistle drifting through the night air. Slow. Mocking. It circled the cabin like a predator scenting its prey. Claire's blood went cold. Ethan. His jaw tightened. He clenched his fists so tightly the flashlight trembled in his grip. "They want to scare us." "Well, it's working," she snapped. The whistle stopped. Silence returned. Then came a sound from the back of the cabin, a scrape against the wall, metal against wood. Something dragged along the outside. A knife, maybe. A crowbar. Each scrape was deliberate, cruel. Claire's heart hammered in her chest. She whispered, "They're not trying to get in." Ethan glanced at her sharply. "What are you talking about?" "They could have broken the window. They could have kicked the door down already. But they haven't. They're playing with us." Her voice cracked. "They're enjoying this." Ethan shook his head violently, like he could throw her words away. "No. No, they're just trying to scare us so we'll run out. That's what they want." "And then what?" Claire's whisper was sharp, frantic. "What happens if we run?" Neither of them wanted to answer. The fire hissed low, throwing long, jagged shadows across the cabin walls. Then, suddenly, 3 loud knocks. This time on the back door. Both of them spun toward the sound. Before the echo died, more knocks rattled the front door. Then the side windows. A chorus of pounding from every angle, like the cabin itself was under siege. Claire clapped her hands over her ears, shaking her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Stop it, please. Ethan rushed to her, pulling her close. She clung to him desperately, her nails digging into his back. The pounding stopped. Silence again. This time it was worse than the noise. Claire's eyes darted toward the windows. She swore she saw movement, but every time she blinked, the shadows melted back into the trees. The masks could be anywhere, pressed against the glass, staring in, and she wouldn't know until they wanted her to. Basement, Ethan whispered suddenly. We'll hide in the basement. Claire shook her head violently. No. No, they'll trap us down there. Where else can we go? His voice was sharp, almost desperate. The whistle started again. This time right outside the window. Claire screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into the table. The wine bottle toppled, shattering across the floor. Red liquid spread like blood across the wood. Ethan raised the flashlight, shining it toward the window. A face stared back. The mask was closer now, inches from the glass. Its blank white surface glowed in a beam of light, empty eyeholes boring into them. Claire's scream caught in her throat, strangled and silent. Ethan's hand shook violently as he lowered the flashlight. The mask didn't move. It just stayed there. Watching. Breathing. Then another mask appeared beside it. And another. 3 of them. All standing at the window, staring in. Claire collapsed to her knees, trembling violently. Her voice was barely a whisper. They're not leaving. They're not going to leave. The fire sputtered and died, plunging the cabin into near darkness. Only the faint beam of Ethan's flashlight cut through the black. The masks vanished into the night as suddenly as they had appeared. The silence that followed felt final, like a door closing on hope itself. Ethan crouched beside Claire, pulling her close, whispering over and over, "We'll make it through this. We'll make it through." But his words felt hollow. Empty. Because deep down, Claire knew the truth. They weren't fighting to survive the night. They were being hunted. And the hunt had only just begun. The quiet didn't last. A sudden crash shattered the silence, glass exploding at the back of the cabin. Claire screamed, covering her head as shards rained across the wooden floor. The sound rang through the cabin like a gunshot, final and merciless. "They're in," she gasped. Ethan pulled her up by the wrist, his grip tight enough to hurt. Basement. Now. But even as he said it, both of them froze. The crunch of boots on glass echoed from the kitchen. Someone was inside. Moving slowly. Deliberately. The intruder didn't rush. Didn't shout. Just the calm, measured rhythm of footsteps, as if he knew there was nowhere to run. Ethan's eyes darted wildly, searching for anything, a weapon, an exit, a miracle. His gaze landed on the fireplace. He grabbed the heavy iron poker and gripped it with trembling hands. Claire's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. "We can't go to the basement. They'll corner us. Then we fight." Ethan's voice was low, trembling, but edged with desperation. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Claire could hear the slow drag of leather soles on wood, the faint squeak of the floorboards beneath weight. Then, the whistling began again. This time, inside the cabin. It came from the kitchen, echoing through the dark hall. A low, eerie melody. Mocking. Patient. Claire covered her mouth to stifle a sob. Her body shook so violently she could hardly stay standing. The flashlight beam trembled as Ethan raised it toward the hallway. And then, from the shadows, the mask appeared. White. Blank. Staring. It leaned just past the corner of the wall, as if peering into the living room. The hollow eye holes seemed to widen in the beam of light, swallowing everything in their blackness. Ethan lifted the poker high, his breath ragged. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice breaking. The masked figure didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched. Then came a loud bang at the front door, rattling the frame violently. Another one at the side window. The others were still outside, striking in rhythm, hammering the walls like drums. Claire realized with dawning horror what they were doing. "They're distracting us," she whispered. Before Ethan could react, another masked figure slipped from the shadows at the far end of the hall. This one carried something long and gleaming. A knife. "Ethan!" Claire screamed. He spun, swinging the poker wildly. The intruder stepped back, just out of reach, his head tilting slightly, as though amused. The pounding on the walls grew louder. 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 The cabin shook under the assault. Ethan grabbed Claire's arm and dragged her toward the stairs leading to the loft. "Up," he barked. She stumbled after him, her legs barely holding her weight. They scrambled up the narrow staircase, Ethan slamming the wooden ladder behind them. It clattered noisily, a flimsy barricade. The loft was small, suffocating. A mattress. A dresser. Nowhere to hide. Nowhere to escape. Claire collapsed against the wall, sobbing. "We're trapped. Oh God, Ethan, we're trapped." He crouched in front of her, gripping the poker so tightly his knuckles were bone white. His voice shook, but he forced the words out anyway. "We make a stand here." Below them, the footsteps spread through the cabin. One in the kitchen. Another in the living room. A third circling near the staircase. They moved with slow certainty, savoring the fear they created. Claire clutched at her chest, her breath shallow. Every sound below was magnified, the creak of the floor, the scrape of metal against wood, the faint chuckle that slipped through the mask. Then, suddenly, silence. No footsteps. No pounding. Nothing. Claire and Ethan sat frozen, straining to hear. Then the ladder moved. Slowly. Quietly. As though an invisible hand was testing their barricade. The wood creaked. Shifted. Then a sharp crack as a rung snapped. Claire covered her mouth to keep from screaming. Tears streamed down her face. Ethan raised the poker high, his chest heaving. A masked face appeared below the loft opening. Tilting. Staring. Claire shook her head violently, whispering, "No, no, no, no." The intruder didn't climb yet. He just lingered there, his faceless mask gazing up at them. Watching. Waiting. The silence stretched. And then, softly, he whispered the first words they'd heard all night. "You can't hide forever." The words lingered in the air like smoke, "You can't hide forever." Claire pressed herself against the far wall of the loft, shaking violently. Her fingernails scraped the wooden boards as she whispered Ethan's name, over and over, like a prayer. Ethan stood at the opening with the fireplace poker raised above his head. His chest heaved with ragged breaths, sweat dripping down his temples. "Stay back," he growled, his voice shaking. "I swear to God." The masked figure below tilted its head, the hollow eyeholes unblinking. Then, slowly, deliberately, it began to climb. The ladder creaked with each step. One boot. Then another. Ethan swung hard. The iron poker came crashing down, smashing into the intruder's shoulder. The man slipped, crashing to the floor below with a heavy thud. Claire flinched at the sound, but the relief lasted only seconds. Because from the shadows below, two more sets of footsteps approached. Ethan turned to Claire, his face pale, his voice a harsh whisper. "We can't stay up here. We'll be cornered." "Then where?" Her voice cracked, desperate. "Out the window." Claire's eyes widened. That's a 2-story drop. It's better than what's waiting down there, he snapped. The sound of the ladder being dragged back into place filled the cabin. Someone below was propping it up again. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed to the window, yanking at the warped wooden frame. It stuck at first, swollen from years of damp air. He slammed his shoulder into it until it finally burst open with a loud crack. Cold night air swept in. Claire could see the dark forest beyond, endless and suffocating. Go! Ethan hissed, grabbing her arm. She shook her head violently, staring at the drop. I can't. The ladder creaked again. A masked face rose slowly into view, followed by another. 2 of them now, climbing together, hands gripping the rungs with calm certainty. Ethan shoved Claire toward the window. Jump! Her heart thundered. She clutched the sill, staring at the black ground below. Before she could think, before she could refuse, Ethan's hand pressed against her back and shoved. She screamed as she tumbled through the air. The fall knocked the breath from her lungs when she hit the dirt hard, pain shooting up her side. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. Above, Ethan swung the poker wildly as the first masked figure pulled itself into the loft. The metal cracked against the intruder's ribs, but he didn't make a sound. No grunt, no cry of pain, just the same blank silence. The second one was right behind him. Ethan backed toward the window, shouting, "Claire, run!" She struggled to her feet, dizzy, her body screaming in protest. She turned back just in time to see Ethan swing again, then the first intruder caught the poker mid-swing. For a moment, the 2 struggled, locked in eerie silence. Then the second intruder lunged forward, slamming Ethan against the wall. "Ethan!" Claire screamed, her voice raw. He looked at her. Eyes wide with terror. "Go!" And then he was dragged back into the darkness of the loft. Claire's scream tore through the night. She stumbled backward, her legs barely working. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her heart anchored her to the ground, refusing to leave him. A loud crash echoed from inside. Furniture overturned. The sound of a struggle. Then silence. Her chest heaved. Tears blurred her vision. Ethan. The window above remained dark. And then, slowly, a figure appeared. A mask leaned out of the opening, tilting down at her. Claire's stomach dropped. She stumbled into the trees, tripping over roots and rocks, branches clawing at her arms. Her breath tore through her lungs in ragged bursts. Behind her, the whistling began again. Closer. Following. She didn't dare look back. Every shadow between the trees seemed alive, every crack of a branch under her feet sounded like it would give her away. She pushed deeper into the woods, the darkness swallowing her whole. And then, faintly, she heard something that froze her blood. Ethan's voice. Calling her name. Claire. Weak. Pained. She stopped, trembling violently. Her heart screamed at her to run, but her legs locked in place. "Claire, help me." The voice came from the darkness ahead. But something in the way it sounded, the slow drawl, the almost mocking tone, made her stomach twist. She covered her mouth with both hands, choking back sobs. It wasn't Ethan. It was them. The woods swallowed her. Claire ran until her legs screamed with fire, until her breath shredded her lungs, until her throat was raw from gasping. Branches whipped her face, thorns tore her skin, roots clawed at her ankles. But still, she ran. Behind her, the whistle floated through the trees. That low, mocking sound. It came from everywhere at once, weaving through the forest like smoke. She couldn't tell if there were 3 voices or 30. Her body shook uncontrollably, every nerve screaming to collapse. But she forced herself forward, deeper and deeper, as if distance could save her. Ethan. Her mind clawed at his name, clung to it. She wanted to believe he was alive, that maybe he'd escaped too. But every time she thought of him, she heard that voice again. His voice, stretched and twisted by something cruel. "Claire, help me." It wasn't him. She knew that. But knowing didn't stop the tears that blurred her eyes. A sudden crack behind her froze her mid-step. She spun, chest heaving, scanning the trees. Nothing but black trunks and shadows. Then a shape moved. A mask. White. Hollow. Just standing between the trees, its head tilted, watching. Claire stumbled backward, nearly falling. She turned and bolted again, branches tearing at her clothes. More shapes appeared in the periphery of her vision. One to her left. Another ahead. Every direction she looked, she thought she saw them, pale faces floating in the dark. Her mind screamed at her, "They're surrounding you." She crashed into a small clearing, her knees buckling. The earth was soft here, damp with fallen leaves. She dropped to her hands, choking back sobs, her entire body trembling. And then, silence. No whistles. No footsteps. Nothing. She was alone. Or at least, that's what the forest wanted her to believe. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she crawled to the base of a tree, pressing her back against the rough bark. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, as though its thin fabric could protect her from the faceless predators in the dark. Time stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Then, from the shadows, came a sound that turned her blood to ice. A laugh. Not loud. Not joyous. But low. Broken. As though whoever made it had forgotten how to laugh at all. Claire clamped her hands over her ears. "Stop it," she whispered. "Stop it, please." But the laugh grew, multiplying. Different tones, different pitches. Surrounding her. Her head spun wildly, searching the trees. Masks glimmered in the dark, faint outlines in the distance. Each one motionless. Each one watching. Her vision blurred, her chest tightening as if the forest itself was crushing her. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The whistle cut through the laughter like a knife. And then the footsteps began again. They were coming closer. Claire scrambled to her feet, nearly falling. She grabbed a thick branch from the ground, clutching it like a weapon. Her hands were slick with sweat, her knuckles raw. "Stay away," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Just stay the hell away." The footsteps didn't stop. Through the dark, one of them stepped into view. The mask caught the moonlight, white against the endless black. He held something in his hand, a long hunting knife, its blade glinting. Claire swung the branch wildly. "Don't come any closer." The masked figure didn't react. He just tilted his head. Behind her, leaves crunched. Another one. She spun, panic blinding her, swinging the branch wildly. It cracked against a tree trunk, splintering in her hands. More laughter. They were all around her now. She staggered backward until she tripped over a root and crashed onto the ground. Her breath tore from her throat in broken sobs. The branch slipped from her fingers. The circle tightened. One by one, the masks emerged from the shadows. 3 of them. Silent. Patient. Claire crawled backward across the dirt, her hands tearing on rocks and branches. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why are you doing this?" No answer. The whistling began again, this time so close she felt it in her bones. The tallest of the masked figures stepped forward, his knife catching the moonlight. He crouched down just feet from her, head tilting, hollow eyes drinking in her terror. For a moment, Claire thought he might finally speak. That she might get an answer. But instead, he raised a finger to his mask, where the mouth should have been. And he whispered, almost tenderly. "Shoo." The finger against the mask silenced her scream before it even left her throat. Claire froze, trembling violently, her back pressed into the cold dirt. The tall figure crouched inches away, the empty eyeholes boring into her. His blade gleamed faintly in the moonlight. Behind him, the others stood still, silent, their masks glowing pale between the trees. Her lips quivered. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw. "Please don't." The tall figure tilted his head, as if studying her words, her face, her fear. Then, slowly, he reached forward and pressed the blade against her cheek. Not cutting, just resting there, cold metal against burning skin. Claire whimpered, her body shaking so hard she thought her bones might splinter. And then, just as deliberately, the figure stood, pulling the knife away. The three masks stepped back, forming a wall of white faces. Watching. Waiting. For a fleeting second, hope flickered in her chest. Were they letting her go? Was this some twisted nightmare that might actually end? Then she heard it. Footsteps. Behind her. She spun around, and her breath shattered. Another mask. Emerging from the dark. But this one wasn't empty-handed. He dragged something behind him. A body. Ethan. Claire's scream ripped the silence apart. She scrambled forward, collapsing beside him, clutching his limp form. His skin was cold, his face slack, lips bloodied. His eyes fluttered open faintly, glazed and distant. "Claire," he whispered, a gurgle in his throat. She pressed her hands against his wounds, sobbing. "No, no, no, stay with me. Please stay with me." But even as she begged, she knew. He was slipping away. The masked men circled closer, their shadows stretching long across the dirt. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. The forest was theirs. The night was theirs. Claire lifted her head, tears streaming down her face. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but filled with fury. "Why? Why us? What the hell do you want?" The mask stared back. Silent. Empty. One of them crouched low, inches from her face. Slowly, deliberately, he tapped 2 fingers against his mask's hollow eye-hole, then pointed those fingers at her. Watching. That's all they wanted. To watch. To see fear take root, grow, devour. Claire's chest caved with a sob. She pressed her forehead against Ethan's, whispering over and over, "I love you. I love you. I love you." And then, suddenly, Ethan convulsed in her arms. His eyes rolled back, his breath tearing from his throat in a final ragged gasp. Claire screamed, clutching him as tightly as she could, but he went limp in her arms. Something inside her broke. She staggered to her feet, blood and dirt staining her clothes, her eyes blazing with rage and despair. She snatched up the splintered branch she had dropped earlier, holding it like a weapon. Her body shook, but her voice was a raw snarl. "You'll have to kill me too," she spat. For the first time, the masks moved together. 3 of them stepped forward, knives glinting. The tall one tilted his head again, like he was pleased with her defiance. Claire raised the branch and screamed, charging at them with everything she had left. Her swing cracked against one mask, splintering wood against bone. The figure staggered, but didn't cry out. Another lunged, blade flashing. Pain ripped across her arm as the knife sliced her flesh. She shrieked, stumbling back, blood pouring hot down her sleeve. Still, she swung again. And again. Each strike fueled by grief, terror, fury. But they were too many. Too strong. Too silent. The tall figure stepped forward and drove his boot into her chest. She crashed to the ground, the breath torn from her lungs. The branch slipped from her hand. The 3 masks loomed over her. Claire's body convulsed with sobs. She reached blindly for Ethan, for anything, but found only dirt. Her voice cracked into a whisper. Please, please don't let it end like this. The tall one crouched again, pressing the cold knife against her throat. For a moment, time stopped. Claire's tears blurred the faceless mask above her. The forest closed in. The whistle began again, low and cruel, echoing all around. And then, darkness. The knife moved. Her scream tore through the night but was swallowed by the trees, leaving only silence. When the forest settled, the mask stood over her motionless body. The tall one tilted his head once more, then turned and vanished into the trees. The others followed. By morning, the cabin stood empty. The fire long dead. The woods silent again. And the girl in cabin 13 was never seen alive again.